Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Candace Thompson-Zachary. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I am the Senior Manager of Programming and Justice Initiatives at Dance NYC, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you for being here with us. Share some love in the chat if you're there. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a Black, non-disabled woman of Caribbean heritage. I am wearing a dark brown and white patterned shirt. I have a chain on. My hair is pulled back into a fro. I have brown skin and a dark brown lipstick with hoop earrings. And behind me today is a blank white wall. I am currently on the land called Airi, otherwise known as Trinidad and Tobago, the unceded territory of the Kalina, Waraho, Kalipuna, Napuyo, Taino, Arawaka, and the Carib people and community. Thank you for joining us for Disability Aesthetics, the first in our two-part Aesthetics and Artistry series. As we are at the mercy of technology, we want to remind you that there may be delays, sound issues, and changing circumstances that may occur during our time together. We invite you to be patient and extend us some grace. An ASL interpreter and closed captioning, live captioning will be available throughout the entire event. Speakers will visually describe themselves as well. Feel free to post your comments and questions in the YouTube chat. We will be gathering questions for the Q&A portion towards the end of today's event, and we'll answer as many relevant questions as time allows. If we don't get to your question during the program, we will try to respond directly via chat if possible. If the chat is not accessible to you, you can use our helpline, which is 646-893-8783. Again, that's 646-893-8783 to submit your questions. If you do use the chat, we invite you to click on the three dots of the chat box header and select Pop Out Chat for an easier interface. We also recommend that you change your settings from top chat to live chat to ensure that all chat messages appear in chronological order. We don't want you to miss any of these gems. We hope that you'll help us amplify these conversations by reposting, tagging us, and sharing your takeaways on Twitter at DanceNYC, on Instagram at dance.nyc, and on Facebook at dance/NYC, using the hashtags. We have 3 for you today. Hashtag DanceNYC Live, Dance Disability Dance Artistry, and Aesthetics and Artistry. For those new to Dance NYC, this organization delivers 5 core services to the field: advocacy, action-oriented research, leadership training and convening, technological resources through our website, and grant making, all to empower dance makers, cultural workers, to create audiences, and to strengthen the collective voice for this art form. You can learn more about us on our website at dance.nyc. I'm now going to go over our community guidelines for our time together and share our land acknowledgement. As we continue to host these conversations, we are all learning how to create dialogical spaces that reflect both our values as a team and organization. The guidelines below are a living commitment and may grow or change to reflect our learning. If you have feedback for these guidelines or any part of our programming, we invite you to share them via our post-event survey or via email at info@dance.nyc. Upon participating in this event in any way, you are entering a virtual space of learning, reflection, respect, and accountability that is based on Dance NYC's values of justice, equity, and inclusion. This means that we, and you, our audience, agrees to share opinions, challenge perspectives, and engage or debate respectfully. We agree to acknowledge and course correct if harm is caused. We agree to honor everyone's personhood and humanity, and to not tolerate speech that is disparaging, abusive, violent, or that is intended to defame someone's character publicly. If anyone acts in violation of these guidelines, they will either be warned and asked to course correct or removed depending on the severity of the action. We thank you for your collective agreement to these guidelines to ensure that our space remains generative for and respectful of our community. As a way of deepening our work and learning in racial justice, we regularly practice land acknowledgements at meetings and public convenings to recognize our country's violent history and its legacy in the space we occupy. This practice is currently under development with the guidance of Indigenous dance artist and activist Emily Johnson to ensure that we embody this allyship. This includes taking actionable steps towards reparations in this initial instance by nurturing relationships with local, Indigenous, and First Nations artists and organizations, and making pathways for Lenape artists and leaders to return to Lenapehoking today. I would like to acknowledge that the city of New York is on stolen land. More specifically, Lenapehoking, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, who are also recognized federally as the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, Anadarko, Oklahoma, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, Bartlesville, Oklahoma, the Stockbridge-Muncie Community, Bowler, Wisconsin, and in Canada, the Muncie-Delaware Nation, Moravian of the Thames First Nation, and the Delaware of Six Nations. The Lenape people are the original inhabitants and caretakers of this land and gave Manhattan Island its name, meaning hilly island or place where we go to gather the wood for the bows. Additionally, as we are gathered digitally and inspired by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb Show in what is currently called Canada, I invite us to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many rural Indigenous communities that at times leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to climate change that disproportionately impacts Indigenous communities worldwide. We acknowledge that changing these inequities are our shared responsibility, as are our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. We recognize that as an organization based in New York City, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the systemic displacement and subsequent erasure of Lenape people and governance on their land. Please join me in taking a moment to recognize and reflect on the centuries of violence, displacement, forced migration, and settlement here, as well as the centuries of resilience, leadership of all Indigenous and First Nations peoples on Turtle Island that have led to our presence and livelihood in New York City today. Continuing our practice of recognition, we would like to name openly the legacies of the African slave trade, migration and immigration patterns, the disability rights and disability justice movements, and the LGBTQ+ fight for justice. These areas and tactics of oppression through which white supremacy and settler colonialism have enacted and sustained its power over time are not the only areas, but rather the main focuses of Dance NYC's ongoing historical acknowledgement practice and justice, equity, and inclusion strategy. We have witnessed as a nation and city the palpable impacts that systemic racism has on the lives of Black and Indigenous people, peoples of color, immigrants, disabled and immunosuppressed people, LGBTQ plus people, and people living in low-income communities and poverty impacted by COVID-19. White supremacy continuously manifests itself in violence at the hands of law enforcement and in interpersonal interactions, our government response to COVID-19, and our cultural institutions. We would like to take a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims of COVID-19 around the world and to honor the unseen labor of the many people that continue to ensure the safety and well-being of our community. We want to acknowledge the violence that has occurred against the Asian and Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and that this has happened after a period of continuous xenophobia and systemic failure exacerbated by COVID-19. We remain firmly in support of the well-being and safety of our Asian American dance colleagues and continue to champion the role that dance can play to foster inclusion, integration, and human rights in the New York City metropolitan area. And last but not least, we acknowledge and mourn Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and more recently, Ma'Khia Bryant, Juan Joseph Daniel Castellano, Darren DeJuan Chandler, and Terrell Gaz, and all Black people whose lives have been violently harmed or taken by the actions of white people, institutions, systems, and the many accomplices, witnesses, beneficiaries of white supremacy who have actively participated in or stood by and observed in silence. I'd like us to take a final moment of silence. Thank you everyone for sharing in that practice with us, I should say. And now we turn over to our event this evening. We are beginning Disability Aesthetics, the first town hall in our two-part Aesthetics and Artistry series. As disabled artists and dance companies continue to develop and codify their artistic methods, tonight's panel will consider the evolving aesthetic frameworks within disability artistry and how disabled artists are challenging existing notions of technique, training, and cultural practice. This conversation will explore each artist's approach with the intention of building informed supportive networks around disability and art. I'd like to welcome our guest this evening, Jerron Herman, Kayla Hamilton, yes, Laurel Lawson, and Yo-Yo Lin. So I'm inviting you to introduce yourselves to our audience, and I'm looking forward to experiencing this conversation.
Thank you, Candace. This is Jerron. I am a dark-skinned Black man with 5 o'clock shadow today and short mauve colored hair. I'm wearing a blue shirt that is like denim style and a gold chain, and I'm sitting on my bed behind or in front of a cream colored wall, and above me is a canvas, a dark and goldish brownish canvas of an original work. I also use he, him pronouns, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Kayla.
Thanks, Jerron. This is Kayla speaking. My name is Kayla Hamilton. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Black person wearing a black shirt, a green head wrap that has a knot of fabric in the center that rests in the center of my forehead. I'm wearing wide frame that I'm touching the sides of, pink and brown glasses. Behind me is a white wall and a tall and wide brown cabinet. And I will pass it to Yo-Yo.
Awesome. I'm Yo-Yo. I go by she, her, or they, them pronouns. I'm a Taiwanese American woman. I have on a lavender jacket, a tank top that's like champagne colored, a gold chain. My hair is blonde with my black roots coming out on top. And I'm sitting in front of a starry night sky, kind of like an outer space. And there's a circle of moons in different colors going through its phases. And yeah, that's it on me. And I'm going to pass it on to Laurel.
Thank you, Yo-Yo. My name is Laurel Lawson. I am a white disabled woman with very pale skin that's pink from the sun today, buzz cut brownish hair, and we'll call it a pink lip, layered t-shirts. Behind me is a spare tan wall with a poster on it with light glaring from it. My pronouns are she or they. I hail from Alatsay, and I make my home at the meeting grounds of Noya Odalv. And let's get started, shall we?
Yeah, this is Jerron speaking. I mean, we're going into legacies, like naming who are the people in our contemporary, current, previous, and future lives that we like stand for. Because that, as Kayla, you articulated that was particularly us, Crip, and maybe even POC centric, like this idea of naming your previous folks, and to continue that. Do you want to start us off?
This is Kayla speaking. Sure. I'll start off by naming Alice Shepard. I can keep going. Leroy Moore. Yeah. Krishna Washburn. I'm sorry, I can keep it with Krishna Washburn.
I'll call into the space Drusilla Hughes.
That's right.
This is Jerron.
This is Yo-Yo. Yes to Josiah. Yes to Alice. Yes to Krishna. I'm calling in Palena KK Brown, my work wife.
This is Jerron. I'm gonna call in Carolyn Lazard.
Yeah, I think this is Kayla speaking. Yes, it's important to name because not all of the folks that we bring are on this Zoom and that we carry with us from space to space. And we know that there are other disabled artists who have yet received the opportunity to be visible or seen in this way. So it's important for us to name them in hopes that people will go and find them so they can find out how dynamic and special and creative and innovative those folks are as well.
This is Laurel. It's also important that we name in our predecessors, our ancestors, the people who were making work in this space, because our contemporary generations are not the first. So I'm going to call in Lisa Bufano. I'm going to call in David O'Toole. I'm going to call in the performers who are unnamed, who found their place in freak shows. And I'm going to call in some of the artists whose disabilities were not publicized, who could not be named as disabled artists, from the relatively recent, like John Callahan to the better known like Frida Kahlo.
This is Kayla speaking. I have a question for the group. So how do these folks shape or impact or influence our works? Yeah. Like, how do you bring them in? And I guess that can lead us to like the homework situation. Yeah.
This is Laurel. I think something that was important for me coming in to dance was to understand the way that dancers before me had made a technique, had made their place, had found the way that their embodiment fit into their art. It was important for me to have an example of that that did not look like the non-disabled dancers who surrounded me immediately. Anyone else?
This is Jerron. I have started to bring them in explicitly, like as like collaborators. That's been like one of the ways in which I call in, and I love naming legacy, but I also am really interested in the qualification of legacy. Like, what contemporaries, even, people who are 10 years older than me, how they can actually become, like contemporary elders, if you will, contemporary ancestors, not based off of age necessarily, but based off of a kind of a rigor in a certain movement, of how they've codified something. Jordan Lord, they are a filmmaker and professor, and I was sitting in another class, and part of the reading became a student, y'all. Part of the reading was this amazing interview between Leah Leah Lakshmi Piepsana Samarasina and Stacey Milburn. And if you don't know, Stacey Milburn has since passed, and it was such a compelling interview between the two of them, because they were doing similarly what we're doing, which is just talking to each other about what settles. And one thing that came out of that was this idea of doulaing someone into disability, that still sticks with me, and is just a kind of reminding factor of what it means to be contemporary with you all, like that you teach me continually, and but not just teach me, you process with me that's akin to birth, every time I'm with y'all, or with people of my ilk. So that's why that really settles for me, and that's how it always is calling in. So yeah, that's what's happening.
You said, this is Yo-Yo speaking. Jerron, you said doulaing, right? Yeah, yeah. I learned the term doula through disability community, I think the first time I learned it was through Yale Palumpus, who's a death doula. And then also through my friend Dominic Bradley, we were talking about dreaming disability futures. And I remember Dominic was like, you know, kind of like unpacking what dreaming entails and requires, and was like, we need dream doulas. Like, we need people to like help us dream, you know, like dreaming isn't something that we can do on our own. So yeah, like I think in many cases, I also find my collaborator, Pelena KK Brown, that's PELENAKEKE. I feel like in many ways, like she also was like my movement doula, like my crip movement doula, kind of like coming into the movement space through interdisciplinary performance work. You know, I wasn't really like, I'm a dancer. Like I was kind of just like moving to explore. And she led me through different kinds of modalities of like, you know, audio description as a way of creating new movement, and also like authentic movement, allowing sensations to guide the movement, was a big part of our kind of like initial explorations together. So yeah, I think like coming into these spaces and coming into these teachings requires the shaman or doula, a kind of like guide. And I think about that, about all three of y'all, like Kinetic Light as a beacon, like Kayla, your work as a beacon. Yeah. End of thought.
Cool, y'all. Thanks for answering. For me, you know, similar to what Jerron was saying about just talking with other disabled artists is a way of bringing in, because I find that I leave with more questions and curiosities than I come into the conversation with, that kind of just continue on as days and years go on, right? Literally like bringing folks in like Krishna to experience the work before it goes quote unquote live, right? To get feedback and their perspective. Not necessarily like in the studio or it's all part of the making, but I do a lot of like meditating, like finding stillness where I will reflect and bring folks in stillness for like a more of a felt sense. And I trust that those things are going to move literally with me as I create the work. Yeah. Also, this is Kayla speaking. I started as a tap dancer, and some of my most favorite dancers, tap dancers, were disabled tap dancers. This is Kayla speaking. And this was before I acquired a disability, or what we think or know of as a disability. In thought, for real.
This is Laurel. I think that's actually a point that resonates with something I was thinking about, Kayla, that I do tend to be a little careful about calling people in. If it's not someone that I know wants to be called into disability space. I also, at the same time, and this is kind of what I was thinking of, I want to be careful about calling in people who are present and making work, because if we say and we believe that this is a practice with power, it's like, well, maybe you're busy. Maybe like you don't want me going, hey, Kayla, come over here. So yeah, at the same time, I just have this little bit of caution and respect around the practice. End of thought.
This is Kayla speaking. I don't always think of calling in as a physical presence. It can be like a felt sense, a spiritual, like in all the sense of what connection is and what it is to bring someone. So I would say like yes and to your thought. You know what I mean?
This is
This
Jerron.
is, oops, sorry, Jerron.
Oh, go ahead, Kayla.
No, I just like want to like, it's really about like acknowledging the folks in your body and in through your work, that you don't do this work alone. Similar to what you were saying, Laurel, about ancestors and people who were, right? You don't really have to do much to bring them in, right? But to acknowledge that you are bringing them in, and it doesn't have to go anything beyond, well, I can't tell you how to bring your people in, but it can go beyond just acknowledging them verbally, or I don't know, whatever you think, you know what I mean? In thought. Sorry, Jerome.
No, but this is Jerron. It reminds me of that talk that you gave alongside, or that you were in connection with Carolyn Lazard and Constantina Savanzanos at the Wexner Art Center, where they just set up like the Savanzanos, Zavitanos. um, it they like literally set up this function of being that we know nominally as response, like just responding to stimuli, responding to your friend, responding to your, to the person next to you, and set it for me. It really just blew me away because the kind of the ways of authorship that we have to like operate under in our fields, especially as they are siloed, and I think they're only siloed because of funding, and so they're only, or because of venues maybe, but which is probably just a product of funding. But nevertheless, like the silo and kind of makes us predatory or proprietary, really, when it comes to why we make or how we make. That does, I think, make it harder to respond. At least that has been my experience. Like people have been more afraid to kind of call in somebody else, especially in like a non-disabled dance world. It feels like if you call someone in, or if you respond to someone and you explicitly respond to someone, that's cutting somebody's check. That's cutting into someone's season, that's cutting into someone's legacy, or someone's, it's cutting into someone else's like pedigree. And unless you're going to claim fealty to that style or to that choreographer, you better not call them in. So that's the kind of thing that is really different about what we do and who we are, because we're just rolling different. We're rolling abundantly. And I think that is shaping up for me as like a cross, but really could be coded as cross-disciplinary, like that my poet friends, that my media friends, that my literature or my theater disabled friends, or my music friends, like that we're all like what they're talking about, what they're going through. It feels very kinetic. It feels very kinetic, Laurel. Anyway, yeah. End of thought.
I didn't come up with the name. Don't blame me for that one. Seriously, that part had nothing to do with me. That was totally Alice and Michael. Yeah, I wonder if I feel like we could just have the entire discussion right here, moving into the really diving deep on the nuances of naming and legacy and the body of tradition and calling in and collaborating with and being in community with, because those all have place and weight and need. On the other hand, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to spend the entire hour talking about it. So, but if we're running with it.
Well, this is Jerron. Let's call in our works then as well, because I think that we do find resource in what we actually made and what our homework is. So yeah, let's bring in our works too. I would say it's a perfect time. Okay, I'll start. This is Jerron. So many ways to raise a fist was certainly this work was certainly a way to kind of think through. My ambition was to think through how we get our occupation of activists, or even of advocate, or of how we as disabled actors get our occupations, and kind of coding or seeing that through the legacies of other protest cultures, if you will, and so really kind of thinking through. So I included what I included was the fist, like this mini solo that I created called The Fist, which was supposed to be just the symbolic, what in my imagination, it was like, what would be the symbolic fight between the host and their positioning, the host and like what they gotta get done, the host and the protest, and what would that look like, and to imbue some varied layered emotions toward that it isn't just anger, it isn't just annoyance, it isn't just hard, it's also soft, it's also unsure, it's also this. And so it really did come out of conversations and mini protests that I had been a part of or experienced, and even just my kind of growing knowledge of what activism entails and is, and just wanting to bring in another shade, another vignette of it that would help everyone kind of get a grander view or a larger view of what that would be. So honestly, that's so we don't get clocked or we don't get cornered. Like that was really my MO. Like it's very easy to get sensationalized and get ghettoized. And so I really wanted there to be a sense of like, oh, we don't really know where this is going, or you don't know the full story of this particular context. And I was really excited by that. And so I was calling in some contemporaries, I was definitely calling in some elders, and was really happy that something flowed through me. Yeah, we brought everyone to the table with that show. Maybe too much, I don't know. End of thought.
This is Yo-Yo. Just wanted to respond. I remember seeing that show at the Whitney in 2019, I think. And
yeah, 2019.
Yeah. And then you incorporated Shannon Finnegan's Bench, some of Ezra Bennis's work on a projection screen. Yeah. I remember witnessing that work and feeling like, like that there was this network that was part of the collage of different forms of activism that you're putting together into the space. And I really appreciated that. Yeah. And I guess as a reminder, we sent out these videos of our performances to all the registrants. So if you wanted to watch the videos alongside us talking, they are available, I believe, in your emails. But yeah, I can go next. Oh, and it's on the chat. So I shared this work called The Walls of My Room Are Curved, and it is a performance that involves microphones attached to my body, and I have a very loud body. I have a connective tissue experience, so I have a very like my bones and joints often make lots of different sounds, like crackling sounds, and a lot of what I experience is very much in movement is through releasing tension within my muscles and joints. And so movement is oftentimes a kind of therapy for me and a kind of restorative space for me. But it also, you know, when pushed too far, it's also a very painful space for me. So this piece is exploring externalizing an internal invisibilized disability experience through sound. And as I'm moving and dancing and emitting these sounds, my collaborator, Despina, who's an electronic musician, Despina is spelled Despina, they would take those sounds and create music from it, just using different kinds of softwares and synthesizers, and it would kind of be this feedback loop where I would be moving and creating sounds. My collaborator would take those sounds and make them into music, and then I would respond to that music with more movement. And yeah, I think this piece for me was one of the first performances I've ever made that really looked at my disability as a generative space. And, you know, like we mentioned Alice Shepherd, but I also wanted to mention her again because I remember there were these group meetings called the Disability Arts New York Task Force with Simi Linton and Kevin Gotkin. And I remember Alice Shepherd came in and like did a whole presentation on disability aesthetics and was talking about, yeah, like how do we create impairment generated movement? And I think that was like a moment where like a switch went off in my head, for like definitely, where I was like, wow, like, is there a way that I can continue to, or that I can like create movement work, create choreography, create dance works using my disability as material? And yeah, and thinking through, yeah, like what are the ways that the medicalized body can be reclaimed as well. So yeah, end of thought for me for now.
This is Kayla speaking. The work that I shared is an untitled work. It's actually my most recent work. It was designed for the Zoom space through the Access Dance Choreo Lab. What happened live in the Zoom space is actually not what was recorded. So what you will witness or experience is actually not the work. However, it does get to like the heart of what it is that I'm going for, which is like decentering like the physical body in dance, and then like questioning or pushing if that is dance or not. with just using description, or how much description, how much of like movement that can be seen with the eyes is called dance. Like, where's the stretch and the boundaries to how far I can push, sight being the prominent mode of consumption for dance. So what you're going to witness is a lot of description, which in full transparency, I'm not for sure if it works. There's lots of layers. It was a risk, something I was trying out. Just pushing between like aesthetics and access, right? That's always a question, well, a question for myself, right? What's too much? What's too little? Probably never what's too little with me, probably what's too much. Yeah, that's what I shared. But yeah, definitely to note that it was for the Zoom space. What you're witnessing was not the actual work in process, but it does get to the heart of what I'm trying to get to as a mover, maker, thinker, with a sight impairment.
Yeah, this is Laurel. I'm listening to all of you. I hear a lot of resonances and a lot of similarities. The piece that I shared in email was specifically really a small process exploration about using video to overlay and find the similarities, how taking myself through all of these environments and working with the particular mathematical equation that that I was using, that I was commissioned to create a work for, and that the work itself is actually a stage work. It's not intended to be a video piece, but this process exploration of moving through these different environments and moving from the ground to the air, and really finding the similarities for me between the environments, which isn't just taking the same movement and translating it through multiple dimensions, because that doesn't produce the same result, but finding what is the integral part of that, which is always, I mean, this has been a lot of my work in the last 4 or 5 years, both what is inherent technique, what does it mean, of course, what movement is uniquely belonging to someone, you know, whether that's like the movement of the ramp that Alice and I brought out in Descent, or whether that's working with someone else and working to discover, you know, what movement is uniquely, inherently belonging to them, as well as the, what is a dance? What does that mean? Because dance is not a visual art. Dance is a kinesthetic art. You know, I've been saying for a while now that sight is not an inherently more valid way of experiencing dance. So diving into this kind of research stream of mine of the multi-layered, multiplex access, and how can we experience that? I mean, I'd actually love to know, what are y'all working on right now? Are you working with anything, or working with ways of experiencing your work?
This is Kayla speaking. For myself, I am changing the way I'm experiencing my work because I now use a white cane in spaces. So how is that white cane a part of me in the dance? So that's like my personal, how am I experiencing the work differently for myself. And also my site continues to change. So I feel like the more I create work, it is a different experience because I am experiencing the world differently. Additionally, you know, I have to be real, like the ways in which I dream for the public to experience the work, you know, take some money that I don't have to bring that into fruition. And not a lot of juice to figure out other ways because I'm tired. Yeah, so I'm, you know, maybe with some rest and continued care and centering joy, I will get some more juice to power forward. With the lack of, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, it's like, of course you need funding, but to truly get to what it is that I'm dreaming of, it's going to take more than my teacher's salary to make it happen, to get people to feel the dance in the way that I want them to feel, because it needs more in thought, needs more people, right? It's no longer just like a solo situation, right? There's some technology that is needed. There are people to help me troubleshoot that technology because I have the dream, I have the vision, but I need folks to come with me and journey with me to bring the language of the descriptions to the body, right? To bring it closer, literally closer through the experience in thought.
This is Yo-Yo speaking. Kayla, I would love to know more about, yeah, like what kinds of technology you're envisioning or dreaming of that would bring the descriptions like closer. Or if you don't have an answer to that yet, that's also, yeah, totally okay too.
This is Kayla speaking. The dreams are there. Here we go. I would love the audience to have headsets and the options to play different description tracks depending like on like preferences, right? So you may want the layered, you may want these metaphors, you may want like, you know, what I consider like cut and dry, right? So like that is one layer. What do you call those sub packs? I believe they are yes, I want the sub, like everybody, you know, those things are like $800. I've been doing the research. I'm like, how many hours do I need to teach, right? To get 10 people in the audience to wear a sub pack. So like, and then there's like a beatboxer. So the beatbox, you know, like the integration of music and technology so people can actually feel the dance in the body is what I'm looking for, and to give more choice so that not everybody's, right? Because when we watch a dance with using the eyesight, right? My body is going to see different things than Jerron's body eyes are going to see, but I want other folks to have the choice, right? To have the agency to choose what it is that they want to see, and not just everybody's getting the same thing, because that's all I have the capacity for. Those are just a few. They're written down. I got to get my journal now. In thought.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I love that so much. The sub packs, I've been also wondering about those. I remember when we had, oh, what this was at some theater show. Maybe it was at I Want to Be With You Everywhere. Maybe, yeah. They had
Kayla gives
those.
a
Oh my
thumbs up.
gosh.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah. Super cool technology to be able to like experience vibrations like of the voice, like of movement, like rhythm, sounds, body sounds. Yeah. I really appreciate hearing that. So thanks for sharing. Oh yeah, we were answering a question. What are we doing now? Yeah, like I think similar in that sense, Kayla, where I'm like, I'm trying to like think about the senses in a more deeper way. And I think Laura also mentioned that too, where I'm kind of trying to figure out ways of, yeah, like continuing deepening like a more multi-sensorial approach to making dance. And a lot of my work, yeah, like kind of like flirts with that a little bit, like thinking through, yeah, like how to make something more immersive, you know, like what does that even mean? But yeah, like how do we make a dance feel closer? How do we allow for access into an experience that is pleasurable and joyful and fuller to what that experience we dream of to feel like? And yeah, like I'm not sure. Like I think I have, you know, actions I'm doing. Like I'm still developing my Tai Chi practice, my Qigong practice. I was living in Taiwan for the past 4 months and kind of like digging into my cultural roots and like really kind of figuring out like, yeah, like what are the movements that my ancestors make? Like, why is this movement important and sustainable? And yeah, like I'm thinking of like my relationship to dance and movement a lot these days. Like I think as someone who's like interdisciplinary, you know, like I come into dance sometimes, but then, you know, there are days where I have too much chronic pain or days where I'm too tired, days that I just like literally can't. So, you know, like what are ways of continuing to move, continuing to dance, continuing to find pleasure in it? And yeah, like I found a lot of solace within Tai Chi because it's so gentle and also yeah, kind of like in this in-between space between like a dance and also meditation and also like a way to like calm the nervous system. And I've been recently going to see a body worker who works on my my meridian channels, or just like where qi flows throughout the body. In Chinese medicine, that's kind of like how the whole body is conceptualized as. There's all these like networks and channels of energy that like flow through the body. So I've kind of just been like trying to pinpoint, yeah, like what are these channels? Like what are the movements within my body internally? You know, like what are the ways in which movement continues to happen inside of me, if not externally? And then I guess like also in a technical way, like I've also been doing like little computer dances. Like I would get a bunch of different images and videos of me moving previously on my iPhone, just like random little doodles, and just like move them around on my computer screen as a way of like collaging, as a way of choreographing different interfaces, and doing that through Zoom as well, just like connecting my screen to Zoom. So yeah, that's kind of how I've been experiencing movement these days. End of thought.
Wow, this is Jerron. Wow, it's so rich to hear all of that. You often forget like how much process is in the work, or like how much process is the work. I am guilty of not keeping that in the forefront of my mind. You know, I'm really vacillating still between what I would conceive of as being a vessel and being kind of my own worker. Currently in a process with Alice and Laurel, and with Kinetic Light, developing this piece called Wired. And in addition, thinking through what is my personal response to futurity or the future. It seems that in this past year, I've been tasked with thinking about futurity in some respects. And so wanting to be a steward of that. And so right now I'm really just reading and listening a lot, and not acting a lot. Not like, I guess, yeah, I feel quieter right now, which is weird because it's like, once you get some money, once you get some awards, you're supposed to be more, but it feels really, yeah, right. Thank you for that. But it feels false to kind of incline or like do the expected incline. Like I just had this response to be quiet, and hopefully I'm being quiet. Hopefully I'm not like doing the most. But I also want to respect kind of that breath, y'all. Really that breath. I did a thing at MoMA with some other folks, and that was really repairing with some other dance artists like Nick Kay and Jonathan Gonzalez, Angie Pittman, like just POC folk, and was headed by Anna Martine Whitehead out of Chicago. And for me, it was really interesting how something very short and you know, it's a little gig, felt very much central to the lifeblood of your process. Like how you need these little islands to keep you going. You need these like little moments of interface that will feed you. And so that's what the reading and the listening is doing, y'all. It's feeding me. So similarly to Kayla, I can then produce something. Yeah.
This is Laurel. I want to jump back to what Kayla was dreaming of for a second and just offer, you know, your first dream sounds a whole lot like Automance, which we are currently fundraising. We are getting towards the point of being able to put that out as a full-on mobile app that doesn't require the kind of intensive tech process, because right now, you know, we go into a venue and I have to set it up and I have to set up the network, and it's a job. But we are working to get that there so you can use it and you can just, bam, dream about the content and the experience and the art, and the tech just be ready to work. So if that's anything, you know, to support that dream.
This is Kayla. It is. Very much so. Thank you for that.
This is Jerron. We're coming up on like 15-ish minutes. Was there any were there any thoughts? I guess my question what are aesthetics to you? Like, let's go back to this kind of the legacies, maybe the points of scholarship or theories, concepts that you really mess with, and that inform your work. I'm very curious about that. This is also Jerron. We have already named some, so we've already been naming it, so it's not anything outside of what we've already been saying. But yeah, if there's any kind of explicit schools of thought that you'd like to bring into the space, yeah.
This is Laurel. I think for me, there's an interesting question around, it feels easier to me to point at a disability aesthetic when it's our bodies. I'm interested in asking, how do you define, do you know a disability aesthetic when it's coming from a disabled artist, but it's maybe not our bodies on the line, our bodies in view? What does it mean to be a disabled choreographer working not in solo or not in self-choreographed work? And I don't know if that's got an answer, although definitely if anyone's got any thoughts on it, but that's something that I want to throw out in the space as a question.
Laurel, this is Kayla speaking. Can you repeat the question one more time?
What is a disability aesthetic when it is not our own bodies on the line? Do we even want to? What are the pertinent things that we can point to that say, this is disability aesthetic, this is disability value? When we're creating the art, but not immediately in it.
You're muted, Kayla.
This is Kayla speaking. I was just repeating it out loud auditorily so it can like sink in. I wasn't saying that. I was just repeating.
That's actually really funny.
This is Kayla speaking. The one thing that comes to mind, and it doesn't fully answer the question, and I acknowledge that, but there's something about consideration and thoughtfulness from the beginning to the end that could be felt or seen, that there is a consideration for as many people to experience the work. Maybe it happens and it's not felt or seen. I have other like swirling thoughts, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, is that when people are being considered, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And like I said, this is maybe not something that has or even needs an answer. But to me, it's an interesting question to sit with.
Yeah, definitely.
This is Jerron. I've often been thinking about the ways in which my body articulates a form that's already there, like improv, or like or how we filter into these categories, and what does it mean when we like touch it, and it's just been a thought of mine of like, okay, well, that's a quality that has a really specific language or articulation on my body based off of mechanics of my body through disability and impairment, but also because it's expressive in a certain way versus maybe a more technical form. Like it would be different if I was a tap dancer. It would be different if I was some, so there's a way in which the form itself, when touched, or when in touch with my body, that might even pair really nicely, that, and then what it was previously historically expected to do, which is really fun. End of thought.
Yeah, this is Yo-Yo speaking. I think if it wasn't about our bodies explicitly, I think the ways that the disability aesthetic or a disability aesthetic could emerge or be felt or be experienced. Yeah, like I think it could be in the ways that what Kayla was mentioning, just like in the ways we create spaces, in the ways that we bring people in the ways that we practice holding space, creating space. Yeah, I'm thinking about the collaborative movement practice that Helena KK Brown and I did a soft run of called Rotations. And a lot of that has been inviting disabled dancers and teachers, movement artists, even folks who've never even taught before to come in and share their practice and teach a class. And yeah, like I think in that kind of like teaching and learning space, there was like a language that was being built. And like we were really wanting artists and dancers to bring in perspective driven kinds of movement exercises. And I think that really helps create like a more specific language in terms of like what could a disabled dancer, movement artist, like teach to all bodies. Though the space was specifically for disabled bodies and minds. So yeah, we're kind of like in process of creating a collection of the curricula that was created during those workshops. So like I think having like a set of instructions is also like a nice way of like allowing multiple bodies to experience what is being embodied and taught. End of thought.
This is Kayla speaking, and it's not fully formed, so follow me. There's something that's like my belly started to like do something, so I need to say it. That like there's something about it being a dancer, existing as a dancer without a disability, and then a dancer with a disability, and not negotiations, but the level of communication that needs or has to happen. throughout the process to make the work to the visions in which the choreographer would like to make, and that it really pushes and challenges me to articulate what it is that I need in that space, and what I can and what I cannot do, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do throughout the process. But when folks don't know you, or just do not fully see you in your fullness, it can be challenging. And like, what does that do to the work, to the movement, to all of it? I know I just opened up a whole bunch and we got to go to Q&A, but I just wanted to put it out there.
This is Jerron. You know you wrong. You know you wrong, Kayla. Get on this, Candace. Shoot.
Hello, folks. This is Candace speaking. I also just want to acknowledge some people who've been active in the chat. You know, Christopher Nunez, Douglas Scott, Elizabeth Motley, Maria Bauman, Victoria Marks, Joan Finkelstein, Karen Peterson, Octavia Hingle, and Morgan de Leonardis, and Sonia. Just saying those names out loud. Well, I have a question here from Victoria Marks, which might kind of take up what Kayla just said. It says, does the notion of disability aesthetics sit against ableist aesthetics?
This is Jerron. I'm curious about framing ableist aesthetics personally. For Vic, wondering if like there is this like, is this like, is it a, do you, I mean, is it typical aesthetics or you know, Eurocentricized prioritized aesthetics, or is it like aesthetics that are perpetually harmful to I would say maybe that's like the difference I would qualify with. But if it is Eurocentricized non-disabled aesthetics, I would say that the relationship to those two are contentious in that they one operates in dominance and hierarchy, and the other one, in my estimation, doesn't. And so, you know, 10 guesses which. But I think in that vein, it's a curious quest to like we've been talking about, like when you fund process over product, is that when you are engaging in a typical aesthetic or in a different aesthetic, you know? And like when, and it's kind of similar to Laurel, like when is the qualification attached, and what procedure or process is then allocated to that procedure and process, and what kind of categories is aligned to that, which I think, you know, as we've been seeing even in pandemic culture, disability aesthetics have been utilized by everyone, maybe not named as such, but it's been used. So invariably, there is a utility in disability aesthetics that is being brought out, which makes me think that it isn't incongruous. End of thought.
Candace here. Anybody else want to take that up before I switch to another question? All right, maybe I'll jump to another one. I have one here for Laurel, can you speak a bit more about your process in developing or creating a piece? What ingredients and dynamics are most important to your work?
Sure. I mean, thinking about a piece as a something that is a complete thought, and I don't consider myself to be primarily a video artist or a film artist. I am mostly interested in live work. So, you know, I'm thinking about this from that perspective. One of the major ingredients for me is story, specifically mythology. I'm interested in those stories that have deep resonances, those stories that cross audiences, cross experiences. I know I look at myths stories that have similar mythological tellings and similar characters across multiple cultures. For example, one of the pieces, something that was commissioned by Cleveland Dancing Wheels and premiered pre-pandemic. One of my major inspirations for that piece was the story of Baba Yaga, and pulling that into all of these other myths about, you know, the hag in the woods. And I don't know how much of that, you know, this was deliberately not something that I ever referenced in the notes or the public discourse about the piece. I don't know how much of that would have been consciously brought through to people who experienced it. But that is a little bit of sort of process background. You know, when I'm thinking kind of in the abstract about a piece, what is the story? What are these underpinnings? What is meaningful here, and what is it being portrayed? And then intersecting that with what movement can be crafted in this time, in this place, with these bodies. You know, specifically, a way that I like to consider that is the movement that can only come through the collision of bodies. You know, I feel so awkward about saying it now that it's been used for the film title, but 1 and 1 make 3. What is the movement that is uniquely created by 2 or more bodies together? Because you cannot create that movement in any other way. Yeah, I think those are 2 things that I think are important to me in process.
Candace here. Thanks, Laurel. I will bring in Krishna Washburn. She asked, when you are creating art, who is your art for? Is it for yourself? Is it for a specific audience? Is it for your own community? Who is your art for when you are in your creative process? And she adds, as her comment, I create art specifically for the blind audience. And she asked us to call in the names of a few people: Mana Hashimoto, Kazuo Ono, Christopher Nunez, and Alicia Alonso. Perhaps Yo-Yo or Kayla should take this one, just because they haven't responded.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for calling in those folks as well, Krishna. The most recent thing I made was a film performance kind of hybrid that I made for myself, which I explicitly did because I was processing a lot of, just like medical, childhood, familial trauma, and really needed the space within my art to really dig into that and really kind of like make something that I knew would be, like a way of processing a lot of what went down. But yeah, I normally don't just make things for myself. I make art, specifically for like people who have similar and share like affinity groups with me for my community at home, for my community online, for my community in New York City, disabled folks, queer folks, immigrants. I think, what I end up putting out is from those identities as well. So I think resonate most with those communities as well. So I also really appreciate kind of like making these works and then like having discussions about these like really intense experiences of like diaspora and like belonging, and have only recently kind of like been more explicit about that in my work as well. So I think it's like continually finding community within making the art as well. So yeah. End of thought.
This is Kayla speaking. I make work for myself because I enjoy being inside of my body and expressing myself in that form. Although it is not like my centerpiece. I often think about the blind and low vision community, although they are my starting point. They're like, it's for everyone, right? So it starts with myself because this is the vehicle in which I express, thinking about blind and low vision folks. And then through that work, hopefully it's for everyone, particularly centering the intersection of Blackness and disability for sure. In thought.
Thank you, Kayla. Thanks for that. I think that's going to be the time we have for Q&A. There is one question I'll just say out loud, but we won't get to it. It's from Elizabeth Motley. They ask, as we negotiate definitions of disability aesthetics, the etymology of the word codify is to reduce, to code or digest. Is this the language disabled artists wish to claim or perhaps reclaim? So, a little bit of a mic drop at the end here. I just want to thank y'all so much for this illuminating conversation. I'm going to just share one of my favorite lines, which was from Jerron: "We are rolling different and we're rolling abundantly." That's what I'm taking us off with.
Yes, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So for our audience, before we go, I just want to make sure that you have everything that you need. Any resources that we shared today, there were a lot of things that were posted in the chat. A lot of things came up in what our conversationalists shared, and those will be on the bottom of the event page on Dance NYC's website, dance.nyc, and it will also be included in the follow-up email to everybody who registered for this event. The conversation will also be saved here on Dance NYC's YouTube channel for future reference. Similarly, can you also, everybody out there, please fill out our post-event survey to let us know how we did and tell us how our programming can serve you best. I'd like to also share gratitude to our ASL interpreters from Sign Nexus, Alana Aloy and Veronica Stale, our live captioner Tara, organized by the Viscardi Center, our chat moderators tonight, Izzy Dow and Sarah Bukowski from the Dance NYC team, and of course, all of the team members that are working behind the scenes. I'd like to acknowledge Dance NYC's Justice, Equity, and Inclusion initiatives are made possible with leadership support from the Mellon Foundation, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and Dance NYC's convenings are made possible in part by support from the Howard Gilman Foundation, the Mertz Gilmore Foundation, and with public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council and the New York State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. Lastly, don't forget to join us for part 2 of this series, of the Aesthetics and Artistry series, which will be Immigrant Artistry, Resources, and Community. That's going to be next Wednesday at 6 p.m. We will share the link where you can find out more about the event and also register in case we also have goodies to share before the event begins. So good night, New York City Dance, and everybody else who is tuning in from wherever you are. We appreciate you and we hope to be with you soon.